I have played poker for almost a decade, but in the first few years, my win rate would look like this. I was a winning player, but I went through big swings and my hourly rate was just about positive. I have improved many aspects of my game, but there is one area that is absolutely crucial if you play low life stakes poker games, and that is thin value betting. Ever since I started doing that, my win rate has more than doubled. So this is what my graph looks like for the past year. So here are a few examples of this play, and you will see sometimes you have to make this play when the board is really scary.
So in this first example we have pocket 5s, there is a limp, the hijack makes it 10 and I just flat call here. I could of course raise, but in a live setting I don't mind just calling because there could be a few more weak players behind us and no one typically squeezes light. So indeed this happened here as well. Everyone folds, including surprisingly the low jack, so it's heads up to a flop and we have bottom set, great hand. Continuation bet from the hijack. We could of course raise already here, but I thought I would do that on a safe turn, so I just call here. Unfortunately we don't get a safe turn. The flush comes in and also 6-7 is straight now, and the hijack bet small third pot, which is what he should do in GTO land, even with a hand like aces, kings, ace queen, king queen, queen jack, something like that. So that doesn't mean much yet, but at this point I don't want to raise because he might fold a hand as strong as ace queen if we raise now. So we just flat, and the river brings in the 6, which is pretty much a blank. Yes, he could have a 7 here, I could have a 7. It is a very scary board with a 4 straight and a flush out there, and he now checks, and when he does that I am almost certain that I have the best hand at this point. So now just think for yourself, what would you do here now? Would you just check behind or would you go for value? And if you play against a really good player, I would advocate to check behind because you can be put in a miserable spot if he check raises you. But against a straightforward opponent, this is a bread and butter play that I would not have done even a year or so ago, but you have to go for value here. And I go for just over half pot and I get called. I don't know what he had, but he said he was very surprised to see me bet here with a set on this wet and dangerous board. And this one is a very similar example. We have the low jack limp. This time we raise ace 10 suited. We get called by the big blind and by the low jack. So 3 ways to the flop. We have top pair, top kicker, but it's a flush board. Here I go for a small c-bet nonetheless. This is one of the best hands to do this with. Although I would prefer to have heart as well. Both players call. When the offsuit 9 comes on the turn, I think it's time to slow down, especially against 2 players, which we do. And now there is an overcard to our top pair from before. Both players check to us, however. So at this point, I'm thinking there's almost no way that either of them has a flush, and of course they could have a hand like Jack 10 now, but even that they might have bet small on the river, so we most likely have the best hand now. And again, this board doesn't look very inviting for a value bet, especially against 2 players. But if you're up against players like the low jack who limped into this pot, most likely they're not trapping, and most likely they are not going to bluff check raise you on this river. So this is a mandatory bet here. And note, I down. I didn't go half pot or bigger. Normally I would not reopen for just something like this, which is what, 40% pot. But in this case I do it because I'm fairly confident that I will not get raised. And indeed the low jack calls. I don't know what he had, but we were good here. And here's an example from a 3-bet pot, very similar concept. Low jack, a loose recreational player, makes it 12. There are 2 callers, so if this is a perfect squeeze here with ace king, I could probably have gone even a little bigger than 55. The low jack calls, and also the cutoff calls. King 10 9, queen jack of course is a straight. They could have pocket 10s, pocket 9s, so we don't necessarily have a massive hand against 2 players, but we still have top pair, top kicker, so I go for a small c-bet and only the low jack calls here. Now the 8 of clubs comes in. I decide to just check because I think I can get value on the river, and the board is now getting scarier and scarier. And it doesn't get any better here on the river. In fact, it gets much worse. Now clubs beat me, 7 beats me, queen jack beats me, pocket 10s beats me, pocket 9 beats me, king 10 beats me. But is that reason to not do anything, to just freeze behind and check against a loose recreational player? No, absolutely not. If this were a world-class pro, then definitely yes, just check behind and hope you win at showdown. But here, once they check on this board, I can't be certain that I have the best hand because they might be afraid with pocket 10s or pocket 9s now. But if they have a hand like king queen or king jack here, they will most likely call. Even with pocket queens or pocket jacks, they might call a bet. So I go for just over half pot, and they think for a few seconds and call. Again, I don't know what they had, but we are good, and it is almost criminal not to go for value in such a spot in a live low stakes game against a loose recreational player. Here we have ace king. We make it 10 and we get called by 3 players behind us, so we're out of position. On ace 10 7, I won't find too many continuation bets out of position against 3 players, but if there is one, this will be one because I have the king of diamonds and I have top pair, so I go 15 and everyone calls again. Now the bottom card pairs, time to slow down a lot out of position, but thankfully everyone checks behind, so now I'm thinking I will go for value on the river, but unfortunately now the middle card also pairs. So we lose to a 7, we lose to a 10. But we win pretty much against everything else. So now the question is, what do we want to do? We could, of course, try to bluff catch here, but I wouldn't recommend that in low stakes live settings. So I decide to go for value here and hope to get called. So just think about it. Yes, if we get raised here, we have to fold. So it is a thin value bet. And we can't go too big because then we would isolate ourselves against really a 10 or a 7. And here we get called by ace deuce because the player on the button thought that it would be a chop against an ace. So he called with a weaker ace, but of course our king kicker plays. So we scoop this pot and just ask yourself again, would you go for value here or not? Because I think this is a great spot to go for thin value, and I did just that, and yeah, it paid off.
So now you've seen a few examples of how to value bet thinly when the board gets scary. Other times, the board is not necessarily scary, but it still requires skill to extract the most value. So I'm going to show you another example now of how to value bet and get the size right.
So there are 2 limps. We of course raise ace queen off. Unfortunately, we don't have position because the cutoff calls and both limpers call. Queen 3 deuce. This is as dry a board as it can get pretty much, even though the 2 and the 3 are connected. But because we are multi-way here, we are 4-way, I decide to just check. If I had been in the cutoff, I would probably have bet, and this is the one hand that I would find quite a few bets with anyway, but I thought because the board is pretty dry, it's fine to just check behind. Now the board board gets a bit wetter and the under the gun player now bets half pot. I could of course raise, but I don't like to play very aggressively in four-way pots, so I just call. And the river brings in another queen, and now under the gun checks. So this could mean that he just took a stab, and then whatever we do, we probably won't get another call from him. However, if he has a weaker queen or something like pocket nines or even an 8, he might now just check to get to showdown, and he might level himself into calling a bet. And again, a player who limped under the gun is unlikely to check raise us as a bluff, so this is a mandatory bet here on the river, and I think most players would find this bet. However, think about the sizing here. Yes, you could go half pot or even 2/3 or 3/4 pot to get a crying call from an 8, but I think there is a better way to go, and this is what I did. I went 150 into 123, so I overbet here, and I get a snap call from the under the gun player. I don't know what he had, but he said he was trapping me because he thought I might have a busted flush draw here, so he was trapping me, and he called me very quickly here, and we got a lot of value. So this is the trick here. Just go very big in situations where people might think that you are bluffing, and you actually go for max value.
I've shown you how to value bet thinly and how to pick the correct size. And now we have one more video, basically a bonus video, that shows you how to combine these two elements.
So this is blind versus blind. Small blind raises to 10. We of course have to 3-bet here with our pocket queens. He calls. Flop comes with a king. Not the best of flops obviously for our hand, but in this situation I bet range. So third pot. He calls another king on the turn. Not that I'm too scared that he has a king, but because he's not a world-class player, I will not bet again. Against a really good player I would bet again in this situation when he checks to me, but here I thought he might fold out a 10 or even something like pocket jacks if I bet again, so I did not do that, and the river is a blank. He checks again to me. I am almost certain that I have the best hand, but again, ask yourself, would you go for value here, or would you just check behind? And if you go for value, how big would you go? And I went fairly big, although I think I could have gone even slightly bigger, because it looks like I'm trying to steal the pot. He won't put me on a king here. Recreational players will think if they have a 10 or jacks here that we are just trying to win it, because they will think I either have a king or I wouldn't bet, or at least I wouldn't bet that big. But because I made it so big, he thought he has to call with his 10. He had jack 10 here, and we got paid very nicely. So don't miss these perfect opportunities on the river where you can get extra value and even big value.
So I hope you've learned something new here, and you can now implement these thin value bets into your poker game, and I'm pretty sure that your graph will also go up. And if you want to watch more videos that will transform your win rate, hit that subscribe button. Thanks for watching. Bye.